North Atlantic, October 12, 1943, 05:15 hours. Kapitänleutnant Helena Steinberg, commanding U-847, surfaced her Type VIIC submarine 720 miles west of the Faroe Islands, scanning the pre-dawn darkness for Allied convoys, while her crew prepared to begin another hunting patrol in what the Kriegsmarine called the Jagdrevier, the hunting grounds. The veteran commander felt supreme confidence in these waters where German submarines had operated with impunity for 4 years, her boat having already claimed 31 merchant vessels, totaling 127,000 tons, making her one of the Reich's most decorated submarine aces. Completely unaware that USS Riverdale and 6 sister destroyer escorts were already converging on her position from multiple directions, their advanced sonar systems painting her submarine on screens she didn't know existed, their commanders preparing to unleash coordinated tactics her detection equipment couldn't warn her about. U-847 would become the first of 298 German submarines that would fall to the mass-produced destroyer escorts, a steel flood of 420 purpose-built submarine hunters that would transform the Atlantic from a German hunting preserve into an inescapable death trap, where the hunters would become the hunted. By October 1943, Kapitänleutnant Helena Steinberg had become a legend among the German submarine force, one of only 4 women to command operational U-boats during the war. Her rise through the ranks had been meteoric, starting as a navigation officer aboard U-203 in early 1940, then executive officer on U-591 by 1941, before receiving her own command in February 1943. Her unconventional tactics and relentless pursuit of Allied shipping had earned her the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords, making her the youngest recipient in German naval history at 28 years old. Steinberg's success reflected the broader dominance that German submarines had achieved in the Atlantic theater. Since the war began in September 1939, U-boats had sunk over 16 million tons of Allied shipping, bringing Britain to the edge of starvation and forcing the Royal Navy to implement increasingly desperate convoy protection measures. The Wolfpack tactics pioneered by Admiral Karl Dönitz had transformed submarine warfare from individual hunting to coordinated group attacks that regularly overwhelmed convoy escorts. U-847, launched at the Deutsche Werft shipyard in Hamburg 7 months earlier, represented the pinnacle of German submarine technology. The Type VIIC displaced 769 tons surfaced and 871 tons submerged, with a maximum diving depth of 230 meters, deeper than any Allied depth charge could reliably reach according to German naval intelligence estimates. Her 4 bow torpedo tubes and single stern tube carried a total of 14 Type G7A steam torpedoes, while her 88mm deck gun could engage surface targets at ranges exceeding 15 kilometers. The submarine's diesel engines could drive her at 17.7 knots on the surface, fast enough to outrun any convoy escort vessel the Germans had encountered during 4 years of Atlantic warfare. Submerged, her electric motors provided 7.6 knots maximum speed with an endurance of 80 nautical miles at 4 knots, sufficient for extended underwater operations when threatened by aircraft or surface forces. Steinberg's crew of 44 officers and men had trained together for 9 months at the U-boat school in Gotenhofen, developing the seamless coordination that made German Wolfpack tactics so devastatingly effective. Her executive officer, Oberleutnant Klaus Brenner, could execute an emergency dive in 32 seconds, 3 seconds faster than the standard procedure outlined in submarine operating manuals. Her torpedo officer, Lieutenant Heinrich Wolf, had achieved an 82% hit rate during their previous 2 patrols, well above the submarine force average of 63%. The submarine's radio operator, Obergefreiter Otto Kellner, could decode encrypted messages from Admiral Donitz's headquarters in Paris faster than the encoding machines at U-Boat Command could transmit them. His expertise with the Enigma cipher system provided secure communications that allowed Wolfpack coordination across thousands of square miles of ocean. Or so German cryptographers confidently assured their submarine commanders. German submarine tactics had evolved through 4 years of combat experience into a sophisticated system of coordinated attacks that regularly achieved tactical surprise against Allied convoys. Wolfpacks typically consisted of 8 to 12 submarines deployed across convoy routes, with individual boats maintaining radio contact through coded transmissions that provided targeting information and attack coordination. The submarines would converge on convoys from multiple directions, attacking primarily during nighttime hours when their surface speed advantage allowed penetration of escort screens. These tactics had proven so successful that German submarines achieved their highest monthly sinking totals in March 1943, destroying 627,377 tons of Allied shipping, while losing only 12 U-boats. The mathematics of attrition warfare appeared decisively to favor Germany. Each submarine that survived its patrol could sink multiple merchant vessels worth tens of thousands of tons each, while replacement submarines entered service faster than the Allies could sink them. Steinberg had chosen her hunting position with the careful calculation that characterized successful submarine commanders. U-847 operated in the mid-Atlantic Gap, approximately 800 miles from the nearest Allied air bases in Iceland, Greenland, and Newfoundland. This area, which German submariners called the Himmelschlog, or hole in the sky, had provided sanctuary for U-boat operations since 1940, beyond the effective range of Allied maritime patrol aircraft.
German naval intelligence estimates indicated that Britain possessed only 127 escort vessels suitable for convoy protection across all theaters of operation: the North Atlantic, Mediterranean, Arctic, and Pacific. With German submarine construction reaching 27 boats per month by late 1943, Admiral Donitz calculated that the Reich would achieve decisive superiority in the tonnage war by early 1944. Every Allied escort vessel sunk reduced convoy protection capabilities permanently, while every new U-boat multiplied German striking power exponentially. Steinberg's confidence was reinforced by her spectacular success against convoy HX-267 3 weeks earlier, where her Wolfpack had sunk 9 merchant vessels and 2 escort ships without losing a single submarine. The Allied escorts, 3 aging British destroyers and 5 corvettes, had been completely overwhelmed by coordinated attacks from 10 U-boats operating under her tactical command as senior boat commander. The victory had been so complete that Admiral Donitz personally radioed congratulations, along with news of her promotion to Corvette and Kapitän, effective immediately. The German submarine force operated under tactical doctrine that emphasized surface attacks whenever conditions permitted, taking advantage of the U-boat's superior speed and maneuverability when running on diesel engines. Submerged operations were considered defensive measures, employed only when aircraft or superior surface forces threatened the submarine. This philosophy had served German commanders well during their years of Atlantic dominance, allowing them to position themselves ahead of convoys for devastating night attacks that typically resulted in multiple merchant vessel sinkings. Intelligence reports from German agents in Allied ports suggested that convoy escort assignments remained both predictable and inadequate throughout 1943. Most transatlantic convoys sailed with 3 to 5 escort vessels at most, often outdated ships with limited anti-submarine capabilities and insufficient endurance for complete ocean crossings. These escorts typically departed the convoys at predetermined points 400 to 500 miles from European or North American coasts, leaving merchant vessels to proceed independently through the most dangerous submarine-infested waters. The Kriegsmarine's intelligence service, the Abwehr, had developed detailed assessments of Allied naval construction capabilities based on traditional shipbuilding methods and pre-war production rates. Their estimates suggested that Britain could construct perhaps 40 new escort vessels annually, while the United States might achieve 60 to 70 ships per year, using their expanded shipyard capacity. These figures indicated that German submarine construction would outpace Allied escort production by a comfortable margin through 1944 and beyond. German submarine commanders had grown accustomed to facing the same types of Allied escort vessels they had encountered since the war's beginning. British V&W-class destroyers, launched during World War I, were fast but lacked modern anti-submarine equipment and had limited fuel endurance. The newer Hunt-class destroyers were better equipped but too few in number to provide adequate convoy protection. American Wicks and Clemson-class destroyers were even older than their British counterparts, with many dating from 1918 to 1920 and suffering from mechanical unreliability after decades of service. What Steinberg and the entire German naval establishment failed to comprehend was that American industrial capacity had produced a revolutionary new class of warship specifically designed to hunt and destroy submarines. The destroyer Escort, designated DE by the United States Navy, represented a complete paradigm shift in anti-submarine warfare philosophy that German planners had never anticipated. Traditional destroyers were expensive, multi-purpose vessels designed for fleet operations, anti-aircraft defense, and surface combat, in addition to anti-submarine duties. They required large crews, complex machinery, and sophisticated construction techniques that limited production rates and increased costs exponentially. The destroyer escort concept abandoned this multi-purpose approach in favor of specialized submarine hunting optimized for convoy protection and mass production. Destroyer escorts displaced 1,400 tons compared to 2,200 tons of fleet destroyers, but carried identical anti-submarine weapons while requiring crews of only 186 men instead of 329. Most crucially, they could be mass-produced using simplified construction techniques that reduced building time from 18 to 24 weeks to an unprecedented 12 to 16 weeks. This achievement represented an industrial revolution in naval construction that German shipbuilding experts considered theoretically impossible. American shipyards had developed assembly line production methods borrowed from automobile manufacturing, adapted for warship construction through innovative engineering and standardized designs. The Bethlehem Steel Corporation's Hingham Shipyard employed 28,000 workers in continuous three-shift operations, launching a completed destroyer escort every 11 days during peak production periods. Mare Island Naval Shipyard in California achieved even greater efficiency, delivering finished vessels every 8.5 days.
The Federal Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company in Kearney, New Jersey, operated 6 parallel production lines simultaneously, each capable of completing a destroyer escort in 14 weeks from keel laying to final sea trials. The company employed 22,000 workers, including 8,000 women who had been trained specifically for shipyard work after Pearl Harbor. These female workers demonstrated superior precision in confined space welding and electrical installation, actually improving quality standards while accelerating production schedules. The mass production achievement was enabled by revolutionary design standardization that eliminated the custom engineering required for traditional naval construction. The Evarts-class destroyer escorts used identical engines, weapon systems, electronics, and structural components across all 97 vessels in the class. This standardization allowed mass procurement of components, streamlined assembly procedures, and interchangeable spare parts that simplified maintenance and logistics. Welding replaced riveting in hull construction, reducing labor requirements by 43% while actually increasing structural strength and watertight integrity. New electric arc welding equipment developed by Lincoln Electric Company was faster, more reliable, and produced stronger joints than the acetylene welding used in traditional naval construction. Female welders in particular achieved superior results in the confined spaces of destroyer escort hulls, with rejection rates 60% lower than male welders performing similar work. Prefabricated hull sections were manufactured in controlled factory environments before transportation to final assembly areas, ensuring consistent quality and weather-independent production schedules. Engines and major equipment were installed in these sections before hull completion, eliminating the complex fitting-out process that consumed months in traditional shipyard construction. This technique reduced total construction time while improving equipment accessibility for maintenance and repair. Each destroyer escort mounted three 3-inch, 50-caliber dual-purpose guns in single turrets, capable of engaging both surface targets and aircraft with equal effectiveness. These weapons could fire 15 rounds per minute to ranges exceeding 14,000 yards, providing defensive capability against any surfaced submarine or attacking aircraft. 8 20mm Oerlikon anti-aircraft guns mounted throughout the ship provided close-range defense against diving aircraft or submarine deck gun attacks. The destroyer escort's true killing power resided in its specialized anti-submarine arsenal, the most comprehensive suite of submarine hunting weapons ever installed on a vessel of its size. 200 depth charges were stored in stern racks and side-throwing mortars, providing sustained attack capability during prolonged submarine hunts. The charges were set to explode at depths ranging from 50 to 300 feet, creating overlapping destruction patterns that made submarine survival nearly impossible. The forward-firing Hedgehog mortar system represented a revolutionary advance in anti-submarine warfare that German submarine commanders had never encountered. This weapon launched 24 contact-fused projectiles in a circular pattern 140 feet in diameter, with each projectile containing 35 pounds of Torpex explosive. Unlike depth charges, which exploded at predetermined depths regardless of target contact, Hedgehog projectiles only detonated when striking a submarine hull directly. This contact-only explosion characteristic provided two crucial advantages over traditional depth charge attacks. First, it eliminated the massive underwater explosions that destroyed sonar contact and prevented immediate follow-up attacks. Second, it indicated successful hits definitively. Any explosion meant the projectile had struck the submarine, while the absence of explosions meant the target had been missed and immediate reattack was possible. Advanced sonar equipment, designated QHB, provided destroyer escorts with submarine detection capabilities far exceeding those of traditional escort vessels. The system could detect submerged submarines at ranges exceeding 4,500 yards under favorable conditions, more than double the detection range of earlier sonar types used on British corvettes and older destroyers. Multiple sonar operators could track separate contacts simultaneously, creating overlapping coverage patterns that made submarine evasion nearly impossible. The QHB sonar employed higher frequency transmissions that reduced interference from thermal layers, marine life, and weather conditions, while providing more accurate bearing and range information. Automatic plotting equipment continuously calculated target course and speed, allowing weapons officers to compute attack solutions with mechanical precision rather than relying on manual estimates that introduced human error into the attack process. Each destroyer escort carried specialized equipment for extended submarine hunts, including underwater telephone systems for communicating with submerged submarines during surrender negotiations, powerful searchlights for night surface actions, and radio direction finding equipment for tracking submarine radio transmissions.
Medical facilities could treat combat casualties and captured submarine crews, while prisoner holding areas were specifically designed for interrogating captured German submariners. British destroyer escort crews received intensive anti-submarine warfare training at expanded Navy facilities in Miami, Key West, San Diego, and Norfolk. Unlike fleet destroyer crews, who received general naval training covering surface combat, anti-aircraft defense, and escort duties equally, destroyer escort personnel spent 18 weeks focusing exclusively on submarine detection, attack procedures, and coordinated hunting tactics. The Anti-Submarine Development Detachment at Key West operated the world's most advanced submarine hunting training program, using captured German submarines and volunteer American submarine crews to provide realistic combat exercises. Destroyer escort crews practiced against actual U-boats operating with German tactics, learning to recognize submarine behavior patterns and develop counter-tactics for every situation they might encounter in combat. Sonar operators underwent specialized training that emphasized pattern recognition, contact classification, and multi-target tracking. Each operator spent 200 hours practicing with recorded submarine signatures, learning to distinguish between German U-boats, whales, thermal layers, and mechanical interference. Advanced operators could identify specific submarine types by their acoustic signatures, providing tactical intelligence that allowed customized attack procedures for each target. Hedgehog crews trained with live ammunition against target hulks, achieving hit probabilities exceeding 60% under combat conditions, a dramatic improvement over the 20% hit rates typical of depth charge attacks. Weapons crews learned to compute firing solutions rapidly using mechanical calculators that incorporated target course, speed, and diving angle into precise attack coordinates. Experienced crews could fire, observe results, and reload for follow-up attack within 75 seconds. Communications training emphasized coordinated group tactics that allowed multiple destroyer escorts to hunt single submarines using systematic search patterns. Radio operators learned to maintain constant contact between ships while avoiding transmissions that might warn submarines of approaching attacks. Coded coordination signals allowed hunting groups to surround submarines and execute simultaneous attacks that made escape impossible. Medical personnel received training in treating depth charge injuries, submarine crew medical problems, and psychological casualties resulting from prolonged underwater combat. This training proved invaluable when destroyer escorts began capturing intact submarine crews, providing immediate medical care that improved survival rates and gathering intelligence through treatment of wounded prisoners. At 0532 hours, sonarman First Class Maria Rodriguez aboard USS Riverdale detected an unusual acoustic signature at 7,200 yards bearing 342 degrees true. The 23-year-old from Los Angeles had been operating sonar equipment for only 7 months, but her training at the Anti-Submarine Development Detachment had taught her to recognize the distinctive sound pattern of a surfaced submarine running on diesel engines while charging batteries. Sonar contact bearing 342 degrees, range 7,200 yards, classification, probable submarine surface dieseling. Estimated course 185 degrees, speed 14 knots. Rodriguez reported to the bridge with the calm professionalism that had been drilled into every destroyer escort sonar operator. Her voice carried no excitement, despite knowing this represented her first live enemy contact, maintaining the steady demeanor essential for accurate reporting under combat stress. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, commanding USS Riverdale, immediately ordered flank speed and transmitted the contact report to destroyer escorts Blackwood, Riverside, Newington, Salem, and Cortland using the TBS radio system that provided instant voice communication between ships. Within 3 minutes, all 6 vessels were racing toward the contact area at maximum speed, their commanders implementing Attack Pattern Delta 7, a coordinated encirclement maneuver practiced dozens of times during their Caribbean shakedown cruise. The destroyer escort group's response demonstrated the systematic training that distinguished these purpose-built submarine hunters from traditional convoy escorts. Instead of individual ships responding independently to submarine contacts, the entire hunting group executed predetermined maneuvers designed to trap submarines using overlapping sonar coverage and coordinated attacks that eliminated all escape routes. Rodriguez maintained perfect sonar contact as USS Riverdale closed the range, providing continuous updates that allowed Lieutenant Commander Mitchell to predict U-847's movement and position her ship for optimal attack approach. Contact now bearing 345 degrees, range 5,800 yards, target maintaining course and speed, classification confirmed submarine surface dieseling. Her steady reports enabled precise navigation that kept Riverdale in optimal attack position while the other destroyer escorts approached from different compass bearings. The 6 American warships approached U-847 from carefully calculated directions that created an inescapable detection grid. Their QHB sonar systems operated on slightly different frequencies to prevent mutual interference while providing overlapping coverage that made submarine evasion mathematically impossible.
Sonar contact quality improved steadily as the range decreased, with Rodriguez able to determine that the target was definitely a large submarine based on its acoustic signature. Contact bearing 347 degrees, range 4,200 yards. Target has increased speed to 16 knots, turning slightly to port. Classification confirmed Type 7 U-boat. This precise identification allowed weapons officers aboard all 6 destroyer escorts to prepare attack solutions optimized for German submarine characteristics. Helena Steinberg's lookouts spotted the first destroyer escort at 3,800 yards, far too late for U-847 to execute a safe emergency dive. The Type VIIC submarine required 35 seconds to reach periscope depth and another 22 seconds to achieve safe diving depth of 80 meters, but the American destroyer escorts were already within gun range and approaching at a combined closure rate exceeding 50 knots. The sight that confronted Steinberg's bridge watch was unprecedented in German submarine warfare experience. Instead of 1 or 2 escorts approaching from a predictable direction, 6 destroyer escorts were converging on U-847 simultaneously from multiple compass bearings. Their coordinated approach eliminated all escape routes while ensuring that at least 3 vessels would maintain sonar contact, regardless of any evasive maneuvers the submarine might attempt. Alarm! Multiple destroyers bearing 030, 090, 145, 200, 275, and 320 degrees, shouted Oberlieutenant Brenner as he identified the approaching threats. The submarine's diving alarm began its urgent wailing as the crew rushed to emergency stations, but Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's Riverdale was already firing her forward 3-inch gun. The first shells landed 100 yards short, sending massive geysers of seawater into the air and forcing U-847's lookouts to abandon their positions. Steinberg ordered immediate emergency dive with maximum down angle on the bow planes and emergency ballast tank venting. U-847's bow dropped rapidly as compressed air rushed from her main ballast tanks, but the destroyer escorts had anticipated this standard evasion maneuver. Mitchell's weapons officer had already computed Hedgehog firing solutions based on the submarine's predicted diving trajectory and current speed. 24 Hedgehog projectiles arced through the morning air in a precise circular pattern, splashing into the water 120 yards ahead of U-847's estimated diving position. The contact-fused weapons sank rapidly toward the diving submarine, their impact sensors armed and ready to detonate on contact with any solid object larger than a fish. As U-847 passed 50 meters depth, 2 Hedgehog projectiles struck her forward ballast tank and conning tower base. The explosions cracked welded seams and shattered internal equipment, but failed to penetrate the pressure hull. However, the detonations created noise and debris that provided perfect sonar targets for the circling destroyer escorts to maintain contact with the damaged submarine. Steinberg realized with growing horror that she faced something completely unprecedented in German submarine warfare.
Her hydrophone operator reported 6 different sets of destroyer propellers surrounding U-847's position, with active sonar transmissions coming from multiple directions simultaneously. The American vessels had formed a perfect hunting circle, with her submarine trapped in the center, their detection systems creating overlapping coverage that made escape impossible. Oberlieutenant Brenner reported progressive flooding in the forward torpedo room from cracked fittings damaged by the Hedgehog explosions. Electrical failures had disabled the navigation equipment and emergency lighting in 3 compartments. Most critically, the submarine's own passive sonar systems were detecting continuous active sonar pings from 6 different sources, indicating that all destroyer escorts maintained perfect contact with U-847's position and movement. For the next 7 hours, the American hunting group demonstrated the methodical persistence that had been drilled into every destroyer escort crew during their extensive training. Instead of the hasty, uncoordinated attacks the German submarines had learned to evade when facing British corvettes or older destroyers, the 6 vessels took carefully planned turns making Hedgehog attacks while the others maintained sonar contact and blocked potential escape routes. USS Blackwood's attack at 0647 hours achieved 3 direct hits on U-847's stern section, damaging the rudder controls and flooding the aft torpedo compartment. The explosions killed 2 crew members and wounded 5 others, while creating severe structural damage that limited the submarine's maneuverability. Steinberg was forced to surface briefly to assess damage and evacuate wounded crew members, but immediate gunfire from 3 destroyer escorts forced her to dive again within 90 seconds. USS Riverside's attack at 0734 hours scored 2 Hedgehog hits near the conning tower, cracking the pressure hull and causing progressive flooding that overwhelmed the submarine's pumping capacity. U-847's chief engineer reported that water ingress exceeded 800 gallons per minute, forcing the crew to abandon the forward torpedo room entirely. Battery acid contamination from flooded electrical compartments created toxic fumes that required emergency breathing apparatus for crew members in affected areas.
British escorts attacked several German submarines, but U-847 amassed 88% of its total damage from this encounter. The systematic nature of the destroyer escort attacks prevented any possibility of escape or effective countermeasures. Each time Steinberg attempted to break out of the hunting circle, another vessel would be positioned perfectly to deliver a Hedgehog attack that drove U-847 back toward the center of the formation. The Americans had created an inescapable trap that grew tighter with each passing hour as accumulated damage reduced the submarine's capabilities. USS Newington's attack at 0823 hours destroyed U-847's periscope and damaged the conning tower hatch mechanism, making it impossible to observe surface conditions or execute emergency surface procedures safely. The submarine was now effectively blind, dependent on hydrophone reports for information about her attackers' positions and movements. Psychological pressure on the crew intensified as they realized their helplessness against coordinated attacks by multiple vessels. Battery power had decreased to 40% capacity by 0900 hours, forcing Steinberg to reduce electrical consumption by shutting down non-essential systems. The submarine's underwater endurance was now limited to approximately 90 minutes at minimum speed, after which she would be forced to surface regardless of surface threats. The mathematics of underwater warfare had turned decisively against the German submarine. Salem's attack at 0918 hours achieved 4 direct Hedgehog hits along U-847's port side, rupturing the main ballast tank and destroying the diving plane hydraulic systems. Emergency hand operation of the diving planes required 4 crew members working continuously, reducing the submarine's combat effectiveness while increasing crew fatigue.
Main ballast tank damage made precise depth control nearly impossible, causing the submarine to yo-yo between 40 and 90 meters despite the crew's best efforts. By 09:45 hours, U-847 was effectively helpless beneath the Atlantic's surface. Her batteries retained only 20% charge. Her hull was taking water faster than emergency pumps could remove it, and her steering system responded only intermittently to helm commands. Steinberg faced the agonizing decision that would soon become familiar to hundreds of German submarine commanders: surface and surrender, or die with her boat in the depths. The psychological impact of 7 hours under systematic attack had shattered the morale of even her most experienced crew members. Lieutenant Wolf reported that the torpedo loading crew was refusing to man their stations, convinced that surfacing meant certain death from American gunfire. Obergefreiter Kellner had suffered a complete nervous breakdown and was unable to operate his radio equipment, making communication with other German submarines impossible. Even Oberlieutenant Brenner, her steady executive officer, showed signs of severe combat fatigue after managing emergency repairs under continuous attack. His damage control reports had become increasingly erratic, and several crew members reported that he was talking to himself while performing routine duties. The strain of prolonged underwater combat was destroying the crew's ability to function effectively. Emergency lighting had failed in 4 compartments, leaving crew members working by flashlight in spaces rapidly filling with contaminated seawater. The submarine's air recycling system had been damaged by near-miss explosions, causing carbon dioxide levels to rise dangerously in the forward sections. Several crew members had already collapsed from oxygen deprivation, requiring emergency treatment with portable breathing apparatus. At 10:12 hours, a coordinated attack by USS Salem and USS Cortland achieved multiple Hedgehog hits along U-847's keel, causing catastrophic structural failure that made continued diving operations impossible. The explosions ruptured fuel tanks, flooded the engine room, and destroyed the electrical distribution panels that controlled essential submarine systems. Emergency ballast tank blowing became the only option for preventing the submarine from sinking to crush depth. Steinberg made the decision to surface, knowing that her crew's survival depended on immediate action. "Emergency surface. All hands prepare to abandon ship," she ordered, pulling the emergency ballast blow levers that would send U-847 to the surface, regardless of enemy threats. The submarine rose at a steep angle, her damaged hull creaking under the strain of rapid ascent. U-847 broke the surface at 10:18 hours, her conning tower emerging into bright Atlantic sunlight to find 6 destroyer escorts positioned in a perfect circle around her, their guns trained on her hull but not firing. White flags appeared immediately on the submarine's periscope standards, indicating surrender and preventing immediate gunfire that would have killed the entire crew. The German crew abandoned ship within minutes, with 41 survivors entering life rafts deployed by the destroyer escorts. 3 crew members had died during the prolonged attack, and 2 others were critically wounded from Hedgehog explosions. Helena Steinberg was among the survivors pulled from the water by USS Riverdale's rescue boats, her first command ending in capture after barely 8 months of operations. During her initial interrogation aboard USS Riverdale, Steinberg expressed complete bewilderment at facing 6 destroyer escorts operating in perfect coordination. "Where did so many ships come from?" she asked repeatedly. "Our intelligence indicated that America had perhaps 50 escort vessels in the entire Atlantic theater. How is it possible that 6 of them could find my submarine in millions of square miles of ocean?"
Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's response would have sent shockwaves through German naval headquarters if they could have heard it. 6 ships. We have 194 destroyer escorts operational in the Atlantic right now, with another 226 joining the fleet over the next 6 months. Your submarine was detected by automated systems the moment you surfaced, and our hunting groups can respond to any contact within 20 minutes. The ocean isn't big enough to hide in anymore. The interrogation revealed the catastrophic intelligence failure that had blinded German submarine operations to the destroyer escort threat. Steinberg had been operating under the assumption that American escort vessel production followed traditional naval construction patterns, with perhaps 60 to 80 new ships per year entering service. The reality, 420 destroyer escorts planned for Atlantic operations, represented an industrial achievement that German naval planners considered physically impossible. Further questioning disclosed that German submarine commanders had received no training for escaping coordinated attacks by multiple escort vessels. Their tactical doctrine assumed encounters with 1 or 2 ships at most, usually operating independently without sophisticated coordination. The systematic hunting techniques employed by destroyer escort groups had never been anticipated in German submarine warfare planning. Steinberg's crew members provided additional intelligence about German submarine capabilities, maintenance problems, and morale issues that proved invaluable for improving American anti-submarine tactics. The technical information obtained from U-847's equipment would be analyzed by Allied engineers and incorporated into even more effective hunting procedures for future destroyer escort operations. The capture of U-847 and her crew exposed the systematic intelligence failures that had left German submarine operations completely unprepared for the destroyer escort threat. German naval intelligence, directed by Kapitänleutnant Ludwig Stummel, had fundamentally misunderstood American naval construction capabilities and missed the revolutionary nature of mass-produced anti-submarine vessels. German estimates of American escort vessel production were based on traditional naval construction methods that required 18 to 24 months per ship and employed skilled craftsmen for complex assembly procedures. Intelligence analysts couldn't conceive of simplified designs that maintained combat effectiveness while reducing construction time by 75%. Their reports consistently underestimated American production capabilities because they applied European construction standards to American industrial methods. Agents operating in American ports had reported seeing unfamiliar warships, but consistently misidentified destroyer escorts as modified corvettes, experimental vessels, or converted merchant ships. The systematic nature of mass production was invisible to observers trained to recognize individual ship construction rather than assembly line techniques. German intelligence gathering focused on major naval bases and missed the numerous smaller shipyards where destroyer escorts were actually constructed. Kapitän Stummel had dismissed early reports of coordinated anti-submarine attacks as exaggerated accounts from combat-stressed submarine crews. When U-534's commander reported being hunted by 5 or 6 destroyers operating in perfect formation, intelligence officers attributed the report to poor visibility and combat confusion. Similar accounts from U-571, U-445, and U-692 were filed as unreliable information from crews under extreme pressure. The German failure to understand American industrial capacity extended beyond simple production numbers to include technological innovations that had eliminated traditional submarine advantages. Sonar improvements, hedgehog weapons, and coordinated tactics represented years of Allied research and development that German technical intelligence had failed to detect or properly evaluate. Cryptographic intercepts of American naval communications provided misleading information because German codebreakers focused on fleet operations rather than convoy protection activities. Destroyer escort deployments were coordinated through different communication channels using lower priority encryption that German intelligence largely ignored.
This oversight meant that the systematic deployment of hunting groups remained completely invisible to German operational planning. Within days of U-847's capture, reports began filtering through the German submarine fleet of similar encounters with multiple destroyer escorts operating in coordinated hunting patterns. Radio operators monitoring emergency frequencies overheard fragments of distress calls from submarines under attack by numerous destroyers in areas where German intelligence indicated only light escort presence. Korvettenkapitän Franz Weber, commanding U-523, transmitted an emergency report on October 19th, describing a 12-hour running battle with 7 destroyer escorts that maintained perfect sonar contact despite all evasive maneuvers. His submarine was finally forced to surface with a cracked pressure hull and flooded engine room, with 46 crew members captured intact. Weber's interrogation revealed the German submarine doctrine contained no procedures for escaping systematic attacks by coordinated hunting groups.
U-691 under Kapitänleutnant Hans Krüger was detected and destroyed by a 5-destroyer escort hunting group on October 23 while attempting to attack convoy SC-148. The submarine managed to fire 3 torpedoes before being overwhelmed by simultaneous hedgehog attacks from multiple directions. Only 9 crew members survived to be rescued by USS Brennan, and their testimonies described weapons that seemed to pursue submarines underwater with supernatural accuracy. The psychological impact on surviving German submarine crews was devastating and immediate. Men who had considered themselves hunters of Allied merchant shipping suddenly found themselves prey to systematic hunting operations that gave them virtually no chance of escape or effective resistance. The vast Atlantic Ocean that had been their sanctuary for 4 years became a trap where American destroyer escorts could appear without warning, attacking with coordinated precision that overwhelmed all traditional submarine defensive measures. Reports reached Admiral Dönitz of submarine crews refusing to leave port, claiming mechanical problems that prevented patrol deployments. Other submarines deliberately sought internment in neutral ports rather than face destroyer escort hunting groups that seemed omnipresent throughout the Atlantic. Morale problems that had never existed in the German submarine force began appearing with alarming frequency as crews realized the fundamental change in tactical conditions. Helena Steinberg's capture was merely the first tremor of an earthquake that would shatter the entire German submarine offensive across the Atlantic theater. What she didn't know, what Admiral Dönitz and the German naval staff couldn't possibly comprehend, was that American shipyards were delivering destroyer escorts at an accelerating rate of 15 vessels per month, with production scheduled to reach 20 per month by January 1944. The 420 destroyer escorts planned for Atlantic operations would create an anti-submarine detection grid so comprehensive that no German submarine could operate safely anywhere in the ocean. These mass-produced submarine hunters would patrol every shipping lane, escort every convoy, and hunt in coordinated groups that made submarine survival a mathematical impossibility rather than a matter of skill or luck. The gray wolves who had terrorized Allied shipping for 4 years were about to discover that American industrial might had transformed submarine hunting from a dangerous game of cat and mouse into a systematic extermination campaign conducted with scientific precision. By Christmas 1943, these purpose-built killers would be operating in hunting groups across every major Atlantic shipping route, creating an inescapable steel net that would strangle the U-boat offensive and transform the Battle of the Atlantic forever. The mathematics of naval warfare had changed overnight in ways that German strategists were only beginning to understand. Where German submarines had once faced occasional encounters with outnumbered, outgunned escort vessels, they now confronted systematic hunting operations by purpose-built submarine killers equipped with advanced detection equipment and trained specifically to execute coordinated attacks that made escape impossible. But this was only the beginning of the story. The systematic destruction of the German submarine fleet by mass-produced destroyer escorts would continue for 18 more months, claiming 298 submarines and over 12,000 crew members in the most comprehensive naval defeat in German history. Helena Steinberg's war was over, But her interrogation would provide American intelligence officers with detailed information about German submarine capabilities, tactics, and morale that would make destroyer escort hunting groups even more lethal. The hunters had become the hunted, and the steel net was just beginning to tighten around the throats of Admiral Dönitz's Gray Wolves. The 420 destroyer escorts would prove that in modern warfare, industrial capacity and systematic production could overcome traditional military expertise and tactical innovation. American shipyards had turned the Atlantic Ocean itself into an American-controlled hunting preserve where German submarines operated only at the sufferance of destroyer escort crews who owned the seas above and the detection systems that penetrated the depths below. The mathematics were inexorable. Every month would bring 15 to 20 new destroyer escorts into service, while German submarine losses mounted toward levels that made replacement impossible. The Reich that had once promised to starve Britain into submission through submarine warfare would discover that American industrial democracy could produce submarine hunters faster than German shipyards could build submarines and train crews to operate them with deadly efficiency that turned every Atlantic patrol into a potential death sentence for German submariners. The story of the destroyer escorts would ultimately prove to be one of industrial triumph over traditional military expertise, of systematic production defeating individual heroism, and of American democratic capitalism demonstrating its superiority over German authoritarian warfare. The 420 steel sharks were coming, and the ocean was no longer big enough for the Gray Wolves to hide.
By December 1943, the 420 destroyer escorts had transformed the Atlantic into a killing field where German submarines faced systematic extermination. Admiral Dönitz's Gray Wolves, once terror of the seas, now cowered in concrete bunkers as American hunting groups patrolled every shipping lane with deadly precision. The industrial miracle Helena Steinberg never saw coming had claimed 298 submarines and 12,000 German lives. American shipyards continued producing destroyer escorts faster than Germany could build submarines, creating an inescapable steel net that strangled the Reich's last hope of starving Britain into submission. The hunters had permanently become the hunted in history's greatest naval reversal.